With communists, that human was no longer selfish. In America today, that human is no longer born male or female. And obesity is not something that affects health. You can be healthy at any size. Really, we voted on it. A formerly serious magazine last year published with a straight face an article called "Separating Sports by Sex Doesn't Make Sense." Yes, it does. Because again, we haven't reinvented Homo sapiens since Crystal Pepsi came out. I've spent 3 decades on TV mocking Republicans who said climate change was just a theory. And now I got to deal with people who say, you know what else is just a theory? Biology.
Let's dive straight in. Bill Maher is at it again, taking direct aim at woke culture. And honestly, love him or hate him, you have to admit this guy knows how to spark a fire. Controversy isn't exactly new territory for Maher. For years, he's roasted conservatives, mocked Republicans, and ripped into anyone denying climate change or preaching Bible Belt doctrines. But this time, he's turning that sharp tongue on his own side: the Democrats, the progressives, and the self-proclaimed champions of woke. And let me tell you, they are not handling it well. Maher isn't just tossing out jokes here. This isn't your standard late-night banter. What he's doing feels more like a cultural intervention, an intervention for a movement that's drunk on its own hashtags and slogans, convinced it can bend reality to its will. Think about his point for a second. Decades ago, communists believed they could reshape human nature, create a new kind of person who'd reject self-interest and live happily in a collectivist utopia. Spoiler alert, that dream crashed. People still wanted money, comfort, and freedom. No surprise there. Fast forward to now, and Maher says we're watching the same fantasy, just with a new outfit. It's no longer about building the new Soviet man. Now it's pretending humans aren't biologically male or female. Now it's calling obesity completely unrelated to health. Now it's dismissing biology as just a theory. Really? Biology is just a theory? Come on. And here's the kicker: Maher's right when he says you can't reinvent human nature just because social media says it's empowering. We haven't rewritten the human body since Crystal Pepsi showed up in the 90s, and you remember how that ended. Nobody bought it, and it quietly vanished. Reality has a way of killing bad ideas. Now, pause for a second, because some folks will hear this and immediately think, oh, here we go. Bill Maher turned conservative. But that's not it. He hasn't jumped sides. He's not suddenly waving the MAGA flag. What he's doing is way more interesting. He's calling out his own side for losing touch with reality. And that's why it burns. That's why Democrats and progressives get so defensive, because it's coming from someone they thought was firmly in their corner.
The problem with communism, and with some very recent ideologies here at home, is that they think you can change reality by screaming at it. That you can bend human nature by holding your breath. But that's the difference between reality and your mommy. Lincoln once said that you can repeal all past history, but you still cannot repeal human nature. But he's canceled now, so f*** him.
And let's be real here. The moment you start claiming that separating sports by sex is unnecessary, you've stepped straight into fantasy land. That's not progress. That's not kindness. That's simply rejecting basic biology. And when a so-called reputable magazine publishes that idea with a straight face, it's proof of just how deep this nonsense has taken root.
To study the part of revolutions where they spin out of control because the revolutionaries get so drunk on their own purifying elixir, they imagine they can reinvent the very nature of human beings. Communists thought selfishness could be cast out of human nature. Russian revolutionaries spoke of the new Soviet man who wasn't motivated by self-interest, but instead wanted to be part of a collective. No, it turns out he wanted to be on a yacht in a Gucci tracksuit holding a vodka and a prostitute. Not standing in line all day for a potato.
Things take a darker turn. Maher draws a clear line from today's woke movement to Mao's Cultural Revolution in 1960s China. And no, that's not some wild right-wing talking point. He's highlighting the exact same patterns. Mao urged his people to get rid of the four olds: old customs, old culture, old habits, old ideas. In other words, anything familiar. And if you didn't fall in line, you were humiliated, shamed, targeted by the Red Guards, and in some cases, even killed.
Yesterday I asked ChatGPT, are there any similarities between today's woke revolution and Chairman Mao's Cultural Revolution of the 1960s? And it wrote back, how long do you have? Because again, in China, we saw how a revolutionary thought he could do a page-one rewrite of humans. Mao ordered his citizens to throw off the four olds: old thinking, old culture, old customs, and old habits. So, your whole life went in the garbage overnight, no biggie. And those who resisted were attacked by an army of purifiers called the Red Guard, who went around the country putting dunce caps on people. Yeah, who didn't take to being a new kind of mortal being. A lot of pointing and shaming went on. Oh, and about 1 million dead. And the only way to survive was to plead insanity for the crime of being insufficiently radical, then apologize and thank the state for the chance to see what a piece of shit you are.
Now, nobody's claiming today's woke left is stacking up bodies. But the mindset, the obsession with purifying society, rewriting history, and crushing dissent is eerily familiar. Instead of Red Guards with dunce caps, we've got Twitter mobs armed with hashtags. Instead of state-led struggle sessions, we've got corporate sensitivity seminars and public apology tours. The tools may have changed, but the psychology hasn't moved an inch. Take the example of Jason Kilburn, a law professor in Chicago. On an exam, he referenced slurs but never actually spelled them out, just the first letters. The goal? To teach students how to tackle real-world discrimination cases. But instead of praising him, the university turned him into a villain, kicked him off campus, forced him through weeks of sensitivity sessions, and even made him write essays about his personal growth. And for what? For preparing future lawyers to deal with the real, ugly truth of racism in courtrooms. That's not progress. That's madness. That's punishing someone for daring to teach reality.
Listen to this story. There's a law professor at the University of Illinois, Chicago, named Jason Kilburn, whose crime was that on one of his exams, he used a hypothetical case where a black female worker sued her employer for race and gender discrimination, alleging that managers had called her 2 slur words, the type of real-world case these students might one day confront. And knowing the extreme sensitivity of today's students, he didn't write the 2 taboo words on the test, just the first letter of each. He was teaching his students how to fight racism in the place where it matters most, the criminal justice system. But because he merely alluded to those words, again, in the service of a good cause, he was banned from campus, placed on indefinite leave, and made to wear the dunce.
And it's not just happening in classrooms. That same suffocating mindset has seeped into music, entertainment, and even regular conversations. Remember Winston Marshall from Mumford and Sons? The guy's crime was tweeting that he enjoyed a book, not endorsing a hate group, not joining some political protest, just saying, "Hey, I liked this book," and the mob pounced. Before long, he was stepping away from his own band, issuing a groveling apology, and acting like he'd committed some unforgivable offense.
We do have our own Red Guard here, but they do their rampaging on Twitter. Here's a cute example from a couple of years ago. The banjo player from Mumford and Sons tweeted that he liked a book that apparently had not been approved by the revolution. So, of course, he had to delete the tweet, then take time away from the band. Oh my God, you mean this could have affected Mumford and Sons? And then the cringing apology, "I have come to better understand the pain caused by the book I endorse." Pain? From a book? Unless he hit the drummer over the head with it.
want to know just how absurd that is. Picture John Lennon in the 60s writing Revolution. His entire message was that good intentions can spiral into chaos when you get so full of yourself that you start thinking you're creating a brand new kind of human. Lenin literally warned people not to idolize Chairman Mao. Yet here we are, decades later, watching self-righteous activists repeat the exact behavior Lenin said would wreck their credibility.
There was once a very different musician named John Lennon who wrote a song called Revolution. And people who didn't really listen to it thought it was a rah-rah call for revolution. No, it was the opposite. The lyrics are, you say you want a revolution? Well, we all want to change the world. But if you go carrying pictures of Chairman Mao, you ain't going to make it with anybody anyhow. There's a guy who understood how good intentions can turn into the insane arrogance of thinking your revolution is so fucking awesome and your generation is so mind-bendingly improved that you have bequeathed the world with a new kind of human. You're welcome.
And you're welcome. And let's not ignore the whole healthy at any size trend. Remember when that was the woke slogan of the year? Obesity doesn't matter. Doctors are just fat shaming. You can be perfectly healthy no matter what the scale says. Social media treated it like sacred truth. But here's the harsh reality. Obesity kills nearly 300,000 Americans every single year. That's not fat shaming. That's math. Heart disease, diabetes, strokes, those aren't online insults. They're real-world consequences. But instead of being honest, the woke crowd handed out comforting lies. And what happened? People who needed actual help didn't get it. People who needed medical guidance got hashtags instead, and lives were lost. That's not kindness. That's cruelty disguised as empowerment.
Communists, that human was no longer selfish. In America today, that human is no longer born male or female. And obesity is not something that affects health. You can be healthy at any size. Really, we voted on it.
Here's the point Maher really drives home. Woke culture isn't about tolerance. It isn't about inclusivity. It's about control. Real diversity isn't just about skin color or pronouns. It's diversity of thought, the ability to debate, to disagree, and still coexist. That's what makes a society strong. But step even slightly off the woke script, and you'll quickly find out how inclusive it really is. They don't want discussion. They want silence. They don't want differing opinions. They want everyone reciting the same lines or else. And that authoritarian edge is exactly why Maher's message connects. Because no matter where you stand, left, right, or somewhere in between, you can feel that tension. That sense that one bad joke, one clumsy tweet, or one offhand comment could blow up your entire life. It's draining, it's stifling, and it's slowly strangling the very concept of free thought.
The formerly Serious magazine last year published with a straight face an article called "Separating Sports by Sex Doesn't Make Sense." Yes, it does. Because again, we haven't reinvented Homo sapiens since Crystal Pepsi came out. I've spent 3 decades on TV mocking Republicans who said climate change was just a theory. And now I got to deal with people who say, you know what else is just a theory? Biology.
And here's the real kicker. While the woke crowd spends its energy fighting over pronouns and rewriting definitions, the rest of the world is moving forward. We should be debating artificial intelligence, biotechnology, how to protect privacy while embracing innovation, and how to prepare workers for the next wave of automation. But no, here in America, we're still locked in endless arguments about whether men and women even exist. It's embarrassing. It's backwards. It's the political equivalent of rearranging deck chairs on the Titanic. At its core, Maher's battle with woke culture isn't just about comedy. It's about survival. It's about snapping people back to reality before society gets buried under its own delusions. Because if we keep acting like biology is optional, if we keep canceling people for reading books, if we keep punishing professors for teaching uncomfortable truths, then we're not advancing, we're sliding backwards. And maybe that's the cruelest irony of all. The woke left claims to be the future, the cutting edge, the enlightened voice of progress. But strip away the hashtags and the lectures, and what you're left with isn't progress. It's fragility. It's censorship. It's a full-on rejection of reality. So maybe Maher isn't just telling jokes anymore. Maybe he's doing something far more serious, holding up a mirror and forcing us to admit the obvious. The emperor has no clothes. And that leaves us with one question we all have to answer. Do we want a culture grounded in reality, or a culture built on fantasy? Because if we don't answer that ourselves,